time to eat. So I decided to do that now, excuse me. All right, the next item for discussion is ordinance 219, item number 13. Ms. Camp, could you
Sure. So Mr. Khan had presented a petition to amend the zoning ordinance, and so this is a proposed amendment to the township zoning ordinance. We went through the procedures that the state law requires for you to consider a zoning amendment, and I'd like to introduce some board exhibits. The first is a proof of publication of tonight's hearing. This hearing was advertised in the Daily Local News on June 3rd and June 10th, 2019. That's Board Exhibit 1. The second is correspondence that I sent to the Chester County Law Library enclosing a certified copy of the ordinance. I sent that on May 29th, 2019. The third exhibit is a letter I sent to the Daily Local News, again providing a copy of the ordinance for public inspection. That was sent May 29th, 2019. The fourth is a letter from the County Planning Commission. Because it's zoning amendment, County Planning Commission must review the ordinance and provide comments to the township. They did so in a letter dated May 21, 2019. And the fifth exhibit is the draft minutes from the West Goshen Township Planning Commission meeting of June 11th. They considered this ordinance. The Planning Commission supported the portions of the ordinance which would change the use regulations for the various commercial districts. The Planning Commission did not support the last two sections of the ordinance, which would amend the off-street parking regulations to allow off-site parking subject to certain conditions and standards. So that was the Planning Commission's recommendation. The ordinance, Mr. Khan had asked you to consider changing the uses within the C1. What we did was we changed the use regulations in all the commercial districts, specifically to allow public recreation, athletic club, public place of amusement or recreation, medical clinic. Specifically, those were in the C5 district. And then the last part of it was a request to allow. Right now, the way your zoning regulations for parking read, you have to provide the off-street parking on the lot that you are, where the use is proposed. So this change would allow the parking to be on a lot next door. Let me read it, be more specific here. It would amend 84-55, subsection I, to allow parking spaces for non-residential uses to be located elsewhere than on the same lot when authorized by the board, subject to the following conditions. The owners of two or more lots shall submit with their application a site plan which depicts the location of the off-site parking and a calculation of the number of spaces required for each use. The owners have to submit an agreement in a form satisfactory to the township solicitor, which is signed by the owners of the lots, which guarantees that the parking spaces will be available for the uses proposed. That agreement must be recorded and must remain in effect for as long as the uses require the off-site parking. The third requirement is that some portion of the off-site parking area must be within 300 feet of the building entrance, regularly used by patrons of the use. And the last requirement is that the lots used for off-site parking must have cross-access easements such that the off-site parking spaces must be accessible from inside of the lot or lots without the need to exit onto a public street. So this ordinance is before you for consideration. And I know that Mr. Khan and his counsel are here if you have any questions.
So I have a question. Why the Planning Commission did not like the part of the ordinance change related to the parking spaces? I know two members of the Planning Commission are here. Maybe they could advise us why they did not like that.
Sure.
John Howard, West Goshen. I think the thinking was, Saul, that in this particular instance, there may be a case that could be made for the shared parking, but we felt it would be more appropriate for them to go before the zoning board to ask for a variance in this particular instance. The concern was that we made a change within the ordinance. It's like putting it into stone, and it would apply across the board in all situations. We were concerned about what effect that would have upon parking congestion in the future. That was our concern. Mr. Khan made a very good argument for his situation. The feeling was that take it to the zoning board.
Thank you.
One of my questions is, you see the proposed statute where it says the owner of two or more lots shall submit So what happens if the owner sells to a different owner, one lot, maintains another lot? What sort of...
Yeah, so and actually Mr. Khan's counsel did send to me an example or a specific agreement that would have to be recorded. The agreement has to be approved by the solicitor, and I would if I'm the one reviewing the agreement, I would make sure that it has language that it runs with the land. So that even if a lot is sold, that cross-access easement and agreement that they can use the lot for parking has to remain regardless of who the owner of the property is. So I wouldn't recommend that you accept an agreement that doesn't run with the land. And so somebody who's purchasing that property understands when they pull a title report, as they would for a commercial property, that property has restrictions that run with the land. If they're not willing, because of the use that they want to make, to allow that parking to continue, they wouldn't purchase the land.
Yes, Mr. Member.
I just wanted to bring up a point. I brought it up with Mr. Davis earlier today. The lot that is being proposed to be used for the off-site parking is already being utilized by a mechanic on Walmart Street. And when I was there this afternoon to post the property for the upcoming zoning hearing, there's commercial vehicles being parked there, school buses, large vans. So these aren't moving at night. So the proposed off-site parking is already being utilized by a mechanic on Walmart Street, and that property is not even associated with that property. So there's a loss of that extra parking that would be utilized for this use. And in the past, the zoning hearing board has dealt with these similar situations with the Fit Body Boot Camp over on Westchester Pike, where we had a shared parking situation.
Bill, can that situation possibly be alleviated by putting a fence up or something with the other Ballmer property? Does the Ballmer property, is it the same owner?
I was told by the mechanic that Mr. Khan does own that.
Yeah, can you come forward, please? Mr.
Thank you.
Khan? Thank you.
Eli Khan. My neighbor called me, who owns a business that retrofits school buses with radios, a radio system. He came to me and said, "Your building is empty. I have some school buses I'm retrofitting. Can I park these buses in your empty lot because the building is empty?" And I said, I was just trying to be a good neighbor and say to the guy, "Sure."
So it's a temporary.
It's just, I had an empty lot, and I just said, it was literally supposed to be for a couple of weeks. And I said, I was just trying to be a neighborly guy, I had an empty property, and I was just trying to help a guy out who owns a business in the township for many years and just ran into a jam with some extra. So, yes, it's just a courtesy of me, I'm not charging him any rent, I'm just trying to be a good neighbor to do that. And I'm not sure that that's applicable to kind of what we're talking about. The shared parking for me, as I think I've said before, is really about just sharing something instead of that's one lot has an abundance of parking, the other lot doesn't have enough. So it just seems logical to me, instead of everyone having to build their own parking, you can just share it. You don't have to build more parking. I own both lots. It's functioned as shared parking for over 50 years, and I think the property next door has a similar situation. The office complex next door has multiple lots with multiple driveways, and people park all over the lot. It does exist in the township, and this was just trying to make it formal. Sure.
My concern is, I think your property, it sounds like it makes sense to share, but why should we do an ordinance? Because your unique situation may not be present in some other future instance. And, the basic premise is that each property site should be supported by its own off-site parking. Why not do a variance? Why should we change our whole ordinance and worry that perhaps the next example that comes may not be as amenable to sharing as your unique situation is?
What I would say to you, sir, is you're one of the only townships in the immediate area that doesn't have a shared parking ordinance. It is quite common. I mean, there's other zoning lawyers here that can speak to that. It just makes good planning sense and good corporate sense that sharing parking amongst properties that are changing uses over the years. You know, a lot of shopping centers have pad sites that are separate parcels. The auto house building on the corner of Walmart that's now empty has two little buildings on it, and there's two separate lots. And it's, at some point, the township would subdivide that without there being appropriate parking. We're not trying to reduce the amount of parking overall that's required. I think that's a critical distinction. The required parking for every use has to be there. It doesn't have to be on the fee simple lot that's there. If you own multiple parcels, you're either forced every time to go to the zoning hearing board, or I guess speak up. Sorry.
That's okay. Blue collar record representing Mr. Khan, and I just wanted to speak to one of the planning commission comments, and maybe Chris to one of the comments you just made. First of all, I think it's important that we use the right phraseology. It's off-site parking and not shared parking. Shared parking is a whole different animal, where you come up with a formula that says we don't need as much parking as your ordinance requires because we're going to share other uses with the parking lot. Off-site parking doesn't give anybody any breaks. It simply says if you have to park 5 per 1,000, you have to find property to do it within, either on your own property or within 300 feet of your own property. The practical implication of this is, when you look at this and how many people would do this, in my experience, the only people who would do this are people who control both lots. You'd actually be foolish to encumber your lot with someone else's parking because it's cannibalizing then what you can do on your lot. So the practicality of this is I don't think we have to worry too much about it spreading elsewhere because, as Eli said, it's been in West Whiteland as long as I've been practicing. It's been in other townships as long as I've been practicing. And you never have these problems. Ms. Camp built in an extra protection in your ordinance, which we have no problem with, and it goes right to the heart of, is this binding on subsequent owners? And it is. And if the agreement is going to be changed, the township has to approve it. So there's an extra layer of protection in West Goshen in this ordinance that doesn't exist in other ordinances. But I just wanted to go back to is this a contagion that's going to spread throughout the township? I really don't think it is, because if you take a look at it, if you don't control both of those lots, as Mr. Khan does, and say I own one, and Eli comes to me and says, I've got a use, and I need your lot for my parking, I'm saying, okay, well, what happens when my use comes along? Where are they going to park? Well, you're SOL there. You're cannibalizing what you can do on your own lot. Since he controls both, he can manage that situation better. If he sells one of those lots, my guess is the subsequent purchaser is probably going to put a sunset provision on that shared parking when the lease expires on Mr. Khan's property. Or he'll agree to take it with the shared parking. But you really have to think of it from a business perspective. It's very unlikely that an abutting lot owner would sell you his parking rights because they then might not have enough to do what they want to do on their property. So I don't think it's, I've never seen it. If I thought that this was going to be a problem, and maybe Kristen's experienced it.
I was just going to say, I didn't cover the hearing, but the last week in Upper Euclid, there's a Starbucks that they're proposing that's going to be a pad site at the shopping center. So, shopping center has an excess parking spaces they don't need. They built over the ordinance requirement, and they're willing to provide the Starbucks the ability, because they know their shopping center, they're never going to need to use all the parking spaces. So the only thing I'm thinking of, and I don't know the circumstances of the West Goshen shopping center, but if they're over parked and there's parking spots that are always available, I'm getting hypothetically saying there may be circumstances where uses in the past were over parked in terms of built beyond what our code required, and see an opportunity to be able to get extra income from parking spaces that are remaining vacant. So I guess my point is there may be other circumstances where somebody would take advantage of this. But we can't think of all that. It's really just a policy decision. Do you think that under the conditions that are listed in this ordinance, you could live with having the parking not be on the specific lot and that it's within 300 feet? Can they get there? Whether or not anyone utilizes it, we don't know. But are you comfortable that if they do utilize it, there's enough protections built in that you're not creating a parking nightmare for your zoning officer and you're not creating an unsafe situation? I think those are really the policy thoughts.
So only one comment or possible alternative would be if we were to specifically identify Mr. Colabraco's point, which is that two individuals owning property are more likely not to make that agreement, except for if these contiguous properties could be under one owner. I don't know if that helps us limit it in terms of what this ordinance would be for specifically. The only way you could have this happen for you would be to have
Common ownership.
common ownership.
That would be, if that's something you wanted to consider, that would be an amendment and we'd have to go take this back to the county planning into your planning.
Maybe I could have some clarification on that. When you mean common ownership, you're talking about
Meaning
one
the
owner?
2 lots. Meaning that the 2 lots,
Owned by one owner.
well, and I don't even know if you own them in the same entity name, but you do? Okay.
Right, and whether it's a corporate ownership or...
Right. That there'd be, the same owner would own both lots where you have the parking proposed. That could be.
So I'd like to hear from the planning commission. I know you're not the spokesman from the planning commission, John, but does that address some of the concerns that you guys were expressing at your meeting?
Well, again, I would like you to come before the planning commission, and then we can have that review and discussion.
Fair enough.
I think I just talked to Eli, we're a little bit, time crunched here. We appreciate the conversation, and that's an excellent suggestion. But Mr. Webb said earlier that and we have talked about this, the zoning board has scheduled a hearing, which we probably get to the zoning board quicker than we would back to you for the ordinance amendment. So maybe what we can do is, if we're successful in getting the ordinance amendment, it's not a here and now emergency issue for us, it's not a here and now emergency issue for the township. We would like to continue this dialogue and maybe go back to the planning commission in the meantime, and maybe we do end up with that change in the ordinance, but I think we'd like to run on parallel courses. So if the board could support the request for the variance relief, if you've done it before, and if it's not a problem, and you think this situation, and I think the planning commission said that maybe the variance would be the way to go in this situation. If I go to the zoning board with that, then maybe we can all take a breath, go back, look at this. We're not trying to shove anything down anybody's throat. If there's a better way to do this, we'll tighten it up. And then maybe in the fall, we'll come back and with the changes, if that works. So
you don't want them to act on any part of the ordinance?
well, the first part, the use part, the use part we do. We need that.
So in light of what the planning commission's recommendation was, I have 2 different versions for you. I have a version that has the 2 sections 6 and 7 removed, so it doesn't address off-lot parking at all. It just addresses the changes to the use regulations for the various commercial districts. So that is one of the ordinances. The ordinance that was circulated to the county planning and to your planning commission has, section 6 and 7 with the off-lot parking. So those are the 2 versions. Or you could table everything and wait to go back. But it sounds like nobody had any concerns about the use provisions, and you could potentially move forward with that.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of the use motion.
Any public comment? Ms. Swart?
Hi, I'm not sure where this falls into the mix, but what concerns me is specifically the medicinal marijuana is still lumped into pharmacies, and I would really hope that this board would look at the model ordinance that I believe PSATS has put out regarding medicinal marijuana, to break that up. So anyway, just like earlier in the evening when you were talking about a separate and distinct use for cyber school, I still am of the firm belief that we need a separate definition, separate and distinct pharmacies, drugstores are different than medicinal marijuana.
We do have a different definition. We follow the state law definition for medical marijuana dispensary. I believe that we also follow the state law, and I said this when we had the ordinance hearing on this use. The state law mandates that you treat a medical marijuana dispensary the way you treat a pharmacy. I have seen the model ordinance, and basically all it does is mirror what the state law says. So when I looked at that model ordinance, I did not think it was necessary to recite exactly what the state law requires, because somebody getting a permit for that use must follow the state law. And that licensing trumps your law. So rather than reiterating what exactly the state law says, I just did the minimum, which is what the state law says as far as a medical marijuana dispensary in zoning. And that is, you can define it, and we use the exact same definition as the state law. And what they say is that you should zone them in the same districts that you would zone for a pharmacy. So I think that the way we've done it is consistent with the state law.
Okay, so how would this, if this passes as it's written, how would it affect the site?
It doesn't. We're not changing what's today in your districts. That's not one of the changes that's being made. So where we have it, I'm just cutting and pasting the exact terminology that's in your use regulations today with the added changes. Well, that's not true. Some of the terminology was outdated. It wasn't a use that's ever there anymore. So we did just sort of update them to today's, what we recognize as uses in those districts.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. And if we go to the zoning board, does the township have a position one way or the other on the shared park or the offsite? I'm using the wrong phrase. The offsite parking?
8455, I, principal.
There you go.
So does what Mr. Cogger was asking is, does the board want to take a position to oppose the application, support the application, or stay neutral, which is their variance application to allow the parking to be on the adjacent lot?
I have no problem with the variance.
If I may, with the last application similar, the board did request as part of the zoning board's decision that the off-site / shared parking agreement be put in place and recorded against the property.
So you would support a similar condition?
With shared parking, off-site
Actually-
parking.
Okay.
Has a declaration already prepared, so I don't think they would object to that condition because he already has the work done.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need a motion?
Yes, the motion would be to not take a position on the application, but that if the zoning hearing board felt appropriate to grant the relief, that you would ask the condition be imposed that a declaration of easement for off-site parking be recorded against the properties. Is that an appropriate motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any public comment?
Any concern with the motion?
No.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Hearing none? All in favor? Okay.
Did you just talk for everybody around?
I'm the one that's sorry. Okay. All right, I'm ready for item number 14. Thank you all for coming here. Give your presentation.
Do you want us to know that in a little bit, maybe, and for closer to that, I'd like to help everybody. What we're here proposing is a restriping plan for Blue Road. We were here 3 years ago, maybe, and there was concerns about the shoulder on the south side of Blue Road. We've made adjustments to the striping plan. We're still proposing the 2 lanes westbound from Wilson Street. We get from Wilson Drive westerly to Green Hill Road. And easterly, we will have 1 lane heading in the easterly direction with a center turn lane. We've we've adjusted the lane widths to maintain the existing shoulder on the south side. The residents had expressed concerns about narrowing that area, so we've accommodated that by narrowing the lanes. We now have lanes starting from the north side. They are 10-foot wide, 10-foot wide, an 11-foot wide center turn lane, and a 10-foot wide eastbound lane. We have submitted the plan to PennDOT. They are in agreement with the striping plan. They support it. Unfortunately, they were not able to attend this meeting tonight, but they sent an email stating their concurrence with the plan.
Can you repeat that? We didn't hear that. Can you repeat what you just said about PennDOT?
I can read the email. Yeah, sure. We submitted the plan to PennDOT. They have reviewed it, and they support our plan and what we intend to do.
Yeah, PennDOT will not provide us with an official review unless the board acts to start the official highway occupancy process, which we would submit an official set of plans. We'd go through months of review with PennDOT. We'd have meetings with the public that are mandated. We'd have meetings back with the board, all public meetings. But they did do an informal review. I have an email. We really wanted Fran Haney. He's our PennDOT Senior Manager for Traffic Services Division. Paul Lutz is the signal, Rick, he's the signal manager. Anytime we do any type of signals work, and this would be the Green Hill signal, would be upgraded. We always get his input. So this is from Fran Haney, again, Senior Manager, Traffic Services Division, PennDOT District 6, dated June 18th, today. Rick, our apologies, we are not able to attend tonight's meeting. However, as Paul Lutz indicated during a conversation, the department is in support of the proposed striping changes, which create a center left turn lane and reduce the eastbound to one lane with the widened shoulder. If any questions arise concerning PennDOT's role, we are happy to respond after the meeting. So PennDOT has reviewed it informally. So they've expressed their support.
So did the shoulder increase on the south side?
The shoulder is maintained at its current.
The shoulder is going to be maintained at its current width.
They said increase in this letter, though, didn't they?
Well, increase from the previous plan.
Yes, yes.
We had originally reduced it. We had wider lane widths, which took up that shoulder, almost eliminating it. We went back and reduced the lane widths in order to maintain that existing shoulder.
So just so I'm clear, the overall real change here is you going to 2 westbound lanes and reducing the eastbound to 1. That's the real change in this overall approach.
The eastbound is already one lane.
It's only 1 now.
There's only one lane. There's a center turn lane, and currently you have a right turn lane, a straight through and a right turn lane at Green Hill Road, and you have essentially bottlenecks at Wilson. When you come through the intersection of Wilson and westbound, it comes to 1 and then widens back out at this intersection. So we're trying to maintain the 2 lanes throughout to get the traffic through there quicker. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, we will be proposing to upgrade the intersection at Green Hill Road, the traffic signal, to allow a dedicated left turn signal, both from Green Hill Road onto Boot Road, both directions.
Thank you.
And as you approve the comp plan tonight, this general area is a priority area for transportation improvements. So.
Make a motion to approve.
Just one question.
Sure.
I raised this concern before. I see that we're sharing the cost with East Goshen, which is great. But did we get any buy-in from any of the private corporations, businesses, that a lot of that traffic really belongs to them? So
we can ask the question, of course. And there has been, I know the Industrial Development Authority has been involved with discussions with businesses. We can approach QVC, UPS with
I would
that.
strongly suggest that, I don't know what the percentages of that traffic is. I'm sure, I would imagine it's the majority of these workers coming in, that they share the cost. We're talking Teva, QVC, UPS. It's really asking, especially for the light, which is, gosh, that's needed so badly at that intersection. But even if we're sharing costs, that's pretty hefty.
Will you get liquid fuels money back on that, since it's we pay them all?
Yeah, it's maintenance, so we can use liquid fuels money for it.
So you'll get a lot of that
Use
back.
what money, I'm sorry?
We can use liquid fuels, liquid fuels money for it. And I thought the cost estimate was about $300,000 total,
Yeah,
including the intersection, including the signal upgrade.
right.
That's 300 total, just our share?
No, entire project.
Between the two.
I mean, for these companies, that's.
No, I know, yeah, agreed, agreed. Sure, that we can get into some type of cost agreement, agreed, absolutely. We'll work on that.
You guys pay for all of it.
We can try. That's all we can do.
Okay, so we need to have someone make a motion to, oh, because we did, yes, we're on, thank you. We have a second on the resolution. Okay, you guys are tied to it. All right, public comment, please.
Since this involves East Goshen, if the Muslim ban, I'm sorry, if the resident ban is not in effect, may I ask a simple, quick question?
Let me check and see if there are any West Goshen Township residents who are here.
Thank you, ma'am.
First, okay?
Thank you.
Anyone? Yes, please come forward.
Michelle Ruhl, R-U-H-L, Windsor Drive. I have a question, and I'm trying to visualize this, forgive me, but Windsor Drive
Yeah,
comes down Boot
Rick,
Road.
can you go down one sheet, I think?
It's between Wilson and Green Hill.
Right.
So Windsor Drive, yeah, ends on Boot Road.
Yeah, we have a 3-page yet.
So how are we going to be affected coming off that block? Because now you're saying, are we going to not be allowed to make a left?
No, you'll still have the middle refuge lane to jump into if traffic is not clear.
The one that exists already?
Nothing changes.
Okay.
That still will exist. The only thing that's changing is the far lane is going to go through. Right now, currently the far lane at Wilson, it narrows down, and then
Right, but there's still 2 lanes going up that way, and then you have the center turning lane as you get closer up to Green Hill.
Right, but currently, you don't have 2 lanes westbound. You have it at the intersection, but then it narrows down to
It
1
does
lane.
narrow down,
Yes, oh,
and
yeah.
then it branches
So
back
we're
out to
essentially
2.
widening, right, we're
Okay.
widening on the opposite side of the road, we're not widening on your side.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, I just wanted to see where Windsor came in, because then we always, then we're stuck on Green Hill.
Right,
And I'm
right.
never getting out. Another question, and someone brought it up about, you know, the professional complex. Have we gone back yet, I mean, to revisit something that came up decades ago about UPS, and particularly UPS, I know what traffic's on that road, putting the slip. I mean, they can easily put a slip right onto 202. I mean, it's like a no-brainer.
We have discussed it with county, we've discussed it with Delaware Valley Planning Commission. There is no interest right now to do that. We would
Yeah.
support, you're talking $30 to $50 million to do that. So this is a stopgap.
Okay, no, thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Swart?
Could you just confirm, this is just the restriping plan, or it's the restriping and the traffic light?
Both is going to be done.
Both.
Okay.
But
so-
this is not approving any of that. This is just to start the process.
Okay.
The board will have to approve a signal resolution, approve the project, once we have meetings with the public, and then once we have PennDOT approval on these plans, actual in-hand permit, then it comes back to the board for final approval.
Okay. I would just hope that it's done at the same time, just not piecemeal, like we're gonna restripe
We
first.
can't, we can't,
Okay.
we can't.
Great.
Everything has to be done at the same time as part of the same permit.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Good question.
Ms. Robari, do you have a question specifically for the engineer?
Yes, very, very specific.
Okay.
I apologize first, I used the term Muslim ban, I meant non-resident ban. A specific question, first of all, it's an improvement overall. Would you be kind enough to tell us what is the cost ratio? Who is the expense? Is it 50/50? How's it done? Thank you.
Yeah, we split the road right down the middle, so it'd be 50/50.
They split the lake to East Goshen?
We're splitting the board will agree to split the entire cost. Yeah.
Yes.
Positively affect both townships.
Okay, any other public comment, Mr. Casey?
Just want to go over a few things. First of all, before anything was to be done, this board said 2 meetings ago that they promised that it would have a meeting with the impacted residents before they did anything. We've now submitted a pre-approval process for PennDOT, which is conflicting with what PennDOT District 6 has told me as far as what I told them you guys were doing. What I'm curious about is what is the width of the roadway at that intersection with Windsor Drive?
At the intersection?
Because it's really hard to see the measurements on the website. The image is too blurry. I don't even
Windsor?
What is the width?
It's 50-foot carway.
It's 50 feet. Okay, so the math is, something's wrong with the math here, because according to PennDOT's rules, lane widths are to be 11 to 12 feet. Shoulder width is supposed to be 8 to 12 feet. Then there's the potential for a bike lane. Desired speed on this as a regional artery roadway would be anywhere from 35 to 55 miles an hour. The median is supposed to be 16 to 18 feet across. So when we go and do the math, we have 50 feet minus 7 to the current fog line on the south side, minus another 3 on the other side to the fog line to the curve. We're talking 40 feet available. Minus the 16 feet median, you're talking 24 feet total. Divide that by 3, you got 8 feet.
Activity suggestion.
Yes, you're using desirable conditions for a new road. This is not a new road, and it's not going to meet desirable conditions. It's going to meet PennDOT criteria, but it's minimum criteria.
Actually, PennDOT's minimum criteria is exactly what I just quoted. So
no, that's not minimum criteria for an existing street.
Publication 13MDM-2, Chapter 1, Design, page 14, Suburban Corridor Regional Artery Roadway Requirements. I don't see how I'm wrong. The problem that we're facing here is, again, we have heavy truck traffic going through. We have UPS trucks that are hell-bent on getting to 202 as fast as possible. I just saw one the other day driving roughly 65 to 70 miles an hour trying to get to 202. So my concern is also, when we go to turn to come out of here, first of all, just if we keep it at 50, and we minus the 7, we're at 43 feet. We're shifting the lanes over because we have no choice. We have to move the median down a little bit, which is going to reduce the size of the eastbound traffic. We already have currently at least 1 to 2 bicyclists every day who travel this corridor down Loop Road. And rain, snow, there's one gentleman has his whole gear set up. My concern is if we reduce the spacing for something like that, then if anyone has seen the bicycle that's sitting attached to the pole on the other side of Boot Road, that's what we're going to be facing, is another potential catastrophe here. So, again, these are the minimum requirements that PennDOT says, according to their own publications. This is easily found. It's also found on Chesco.org's site that they're saying that lane width should be 14, maybe 12 at the minimum. And the reason we're dealing with these issues here is because of the overexplosion of construction for corporate.
Tom, you've exceeded the 2 minutes. You're now at 3. Can I ask Mr. Al to actually respond to some of your statements? And I think the process that they have to go through will eliminate your concerns. if those current concerns are valid, then we will know that from what PennDOT tells us.
But here's my real concern, and I'm going to finish.
Okay.
My real concern is that we're going to realize that we might not be able to do this, and then we have the potential for eminent domain to be invoked to widen this road. East Goshen is currently involved in that situation right now with East Whiteland Township at 352 and King Road. They're not against eminent domain use.
They can't condemn land not in their township, so
Right.
it has to be this board that
But this is a joint effort.
I'm just saying, they don't have the ability to condemn land in West Goshen.
And there is a joint resolution that allows for both boards to do just that.
It does not, the resolution that was passed did not authorize condemnation.
Al, do you have anything that you'd like to share in terms of response?
Well, we submitted the conceptual plan as is to, you have, and that's up there. All I can say is PennDOT has given their blessing to conceptually what we want to do. We're dealing with a fixed lane width, a fixed road width. We're not putting in a new road. We're not putting in a median, a boulevard island. So all we can go is by what PennDOT has agreed on, and we're going to proceed with this plan. We're not going to proceed with taking the property and widening the roadway. Obviously, our estimate is based on restriping and resurfacing the roadway and doing the signalization changes on the road.
That's the scope of the work.
That's our scope.
Yeah.
If that changes, our cost estimate is going to be astronomically, it's going to be astronomical. It's not, your budget is going to be completely blown. It's going to go from 300,000 to several million at least.
Okay.
So, and it'd be up to the board to decide at that point if you want to proceed with it.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
I do, really quickly.
Please come down. This will be the last comment.
Yeah, it's not terrible, but I was just thinking of the live day. Are you all communicating with Cineco? I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm in education, so. I mean, like, they're trenching, they're digging, I mean, there's got to be some
They're
communication.
doing an HDD, this wouldn't affect their project.
Okay, but they're.
We're going down an inch and a half.
Okay, that's what I'm
Yeah, there's
asking you.
no-
I'm like, but is there any, before I can dig a potted plant in my backyard, I have to call that 811, so I'm not digging up a line. And
Absolutely,
that's all I'm
that will be all
asking.
part of the project.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That was my question, you work in conjunction with them and making sure we don't hit something.
We will. This is just a conceptual plan. We're not in, preparing final plans.
Okay,
This is that's what the board's going to authorize tonight.
okay,
But prepare plans to submit to PennDOT.
all right, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Devon,
Yes.
number 14, item 14.
Yes, we have a lake pad, are shopping, oh, thank you, I'm sorry, it's 10, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I
it's
thought I
10 o'clock.
recognized her.
Yeah.
Everyone now, okay.
This is just for information only, 5 to 10 minutes. West Goshen Shopping Center, obviously, I don't want to steal your thunder, the Kmart is going to close, so they're thinking redevelopment strictly for show and tell.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Mace. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Fox Rothschild here on behalf of the owner of the shopping center. I apologize, I do not have a presentation up on the screen. I do have handouts for each of you if you want to pass me down. Hopefully I have enough copies here for you. The owner of the shopping center is Capital Enterprises, who's an affiliate of the Robbins Company, and has actually been the owner of the shopping center since it was initially constructed back in the 50s and 60s. Mr. Robbins, actually the principal, asked me to apologize for not being here personally this evening. Unfortunately, he does have a conflict that he was unable to attend or come to the meeting this evening. Here with me though this evening is Deborah Mills-Houston, who is the Vice President of Leasing, as well as Mr. McCluskey from Bernard and Architecture, who can give some more details about what's being proposed. As Casey had indicated, we're here this evening just for discussion purposes only about the shopping center. What we're thinking of doing is allowing a multi-family component to be developed on here. So what I handed out to you on the first page is a survey of the property. All of you are familiar with the shopping center. You have Acme that's on the west side, you have Staples, you have LA Fitness that are in the center, and then to the far east is the space that's occupied by Kmart. That area is approximately 105,000 square feet. Unfortunately, due to the decline of Sears over the past couple of years, the owner has been anticipating that at some point in the near future, Kmart is going to close. So over the past couple of years, we have been trying to test the waters to see what other retail users could come in so that we can keep this as a vibrant shopping center. Unfortunately, we're really faced with two challenges. One challenge is the fact that we do have 3 other large tenants there. We have Acme, Staples, and LA Fitness that all have very strict guidelines on what other uses are permitted within the shopping center due to parking. A lot of them don't want another user that would impede on their parking area. So once you apply all those different restrictions, it's very difficult to find another user that we could put within that space. But more so, which is out of our control, is just the change in retail. Over the past couple years, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that there really has been a decline in retail uses. Most of the retailers are going online sales and closing a lot of their brick and mortar stores. We have had some interest from some retail users, but when they look at the shopping center and they look at the viability, a lot of them have passed, again, due to their own concerns of the fact that their sales are online, and also just given their proximity to some of their other existing stores. And this location, they're concerned that it would, mixed with the online sales, that it would cannibalize their existing locations. And again, a lot of the retailer stores, because of those online sales, are just looking for smaller spaces. You have some of the larger big box tenants, such as Target, who's only opening 1 or 2 large big box stores across the United States in 1 year. So we really have been out there again for the past probably 5 or 6 years looking for someone to fill this space, knowing that it was going to come to a head, and just have not been successful. So the Robbins Company has, been looking at this, evaluating what could they do to keep this vibrant. Obviously, having it as a large, dark, vacant space is not to anybody's benefit. It's not to the township's benefit as people drive by. Obviously, it would also impact the other users in the shopping center. So what we're looking at is a potential redevelopment of the shopping center to allow for a multi-family building in the location where the Kmart building currently is. What in your packet here, the handout number, the second page, is just a rendered site plan of the area where the Kmart building currently is. So what we're proposing, you'll see LA Fitness is to the left of your sheet. The Kmart store would actually be demolished, and we would rebuild a new building for the multifamily use.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Do you have an extra copy?
I do.
Maybe I can just hand this to the audience and they can pass it around to get an idea what you're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Piali.
Sorry.
No, I apologize for not having it up on the board here. So as I indicated, the Kmart store is approximately 105,000 square feet. The new building that's being shown on this sketch plan, the footprint is approximately 90,000 square feet. So we would actually be reducing the footprint. And as you can see on this plan, we would be adding some green space and some amenities to go with the building. This particular layout, and again, it's for just conversation purposes, is approximately 300 units, give or take. And the thought is that it would be all 1 or 2 bedrooms, and be split up about 45% 1 bedroom, 55% would be 2 bedrooms. Again, focusing more so on the market of, professionals as well as, young professionals as well as like empty nesters. So people who don't want to worry about maintaining their property and really, are looking for the benefit and the convenience of some of these amenities. The market that we're geared towards we don't anticipate that there would be a lot of school children. We might have, a few people, because there are 2-bedroom units here, have a handful, but the general market that this will be focused towards would not have the school children. This layout contemplates approximately 2 parking spaces per unit, which again is something that, as we look at other multifamily uses, we think that that would be sufficient. But what we're really trying to do here is create more of a community area. So one of the things that we've tried to do is to create a green space that would connect into the existing shopping center, thinking that a lot of these residents would be able to walk to the Acme for the groceries. They would use the LA Fitness as their gym. But in addition to that, behind the building, there's a green space, and behind that is an existing residential community. And one of the things that we would propose to do is really clean up that green space to the rear of the shopping center and try to make a walkable connection to the residential component that's on the other side that would allow them access into the shopping center as well, so that those residents could also walk into the Acme, use the LA Fitness, and just create that communal area. We did just take a very, very quick look at what type of fiscal impact this would have on the township. Obviously, if we move forward, we'll put something together and present it more formally to you for consideration. But just taking a look at the quick numbers based on approximately 300 units, the apartment complex would have a greater net positive on both the township and the school district as compared to the existing retail use. So again, rough numbers, for the township, it would be approximately a net gain of $73,000. School, it would be about $312,000, so it would be a total of approximately $380,000, $390,000 to the township and the school combined compared to the existing retail that's sitting there. The third handout, and this I'll ask Mr. McCluskey just to give 2-minute overview. I know it's late, it's been a long night, I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but the third handout is really kind of an inspiration board that was put together just to give you an idea of what the building could look like and what type of facade we would be proposing, so you have a sense of what would be developed in this area.
Hi, my name is Michael McCluskey. I'm a principal with Bernardin. We're an architecture firm that has an office in Westchester, Philadelphia, and Wilmington, Delaware. What you see here is really just examples on the left, working from left to right. You'll see existing photos of the center, some inspiration photos of kind of history of Westchester, and as you work from left to right, you'll see even some examples of buildings we've worked on in the Chester County area, and some examples of kind of historic Chester County architecture, in addition to specific apartment buildings in and around the Westchester areas.
So, as we mentioned in the beginning, again, this is just very preliminary. We wanted to make the presentation to you, open it up for discussion or any questions that you have. The property is zoned C2. The multifamily use is not permitted within the C2 district. So if this is something that you're supportive in and would like to see more, we would require some type of an ordinance amendment to allow this type of use. So with that, I'll open it up if you have any questions.
Would it be all rentals or would there be any condos to purchase?
It's being proposed as rentals.
Okay. And any underground parking or is everything going to be outside? I know you said 2 spaces.
Right, it's all surface parking, no structured parking.
Okay, thank you.
Fully sprinklered in a second.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to look, I mean, we're just adopting it, but the comprehensive plan and how that might fit into some of your plans that you have?
We have not yet taken a look at that.
That area is actually an area of focus for our comprehensive plan, to build a sort of town center. So it might be something.
Absolutely, we'll pull that and take a look at that.
How many stories with it is the 300 unit idea that you have? 4 stories. And the economic benefits you quoted, is that just from a real estate tax valuation, or does it include earned income tax?
I believe it was the real estate tax. I know that they had also looked at some of the other permits and fees that were necessary with the township, but I don't know if it was on their income. I'll have to get that information to you.
Can I ask a question? Given the amount of traffic that we have on 202 during most hours of the day, other than maybe after 10 p.m., it's very noisy coming through that corridor. So is there an anticipation of sound walls being put up?
I don't think that we've looked at that far into it. Obviously, I mean, that's something that we'll consider and look into if this moves forward.
Thank you. So the ask for this evening is for us to...
No ask.
No.
No
ask.
This presentation only?
What is the timing on when you think Kmart, do they have a lease that's expiring? Is it imminent that they're leaving, or what's the time frame?
We expect it'll be end of the year.
So like a Christmas clearance kind of thing,
Has the Robbins Company done this for any of your other properties in the area?
We are evaluating it on another center as well.
Yeah, that's my thing.
The only other question I have, I know you looked into different retailers. Back in the day, there used to be a movie theater there. Did you guys look into that option at all?
Well, actually, Deborah can answer that. Deborah is the vice president of leasing and has been working on this project for 5 or 6 years, and I think she could probably best answer that.
I don't have a lot of voice, so it's not very good if you can hear me. I have better on call. Over the last 5 years, I'm Deborah Millshouse, and I'm sorry. Over the last 5 years, we have anticipated the demise of Kmart together with the Sears. And so we've looked at a lot of different options over the years. We have looked at the movie theater concept. You know, there's mixed readings on whether long-term movie theater is really going to have a future. We've looked at some major retailers. We've looked at possibilities of entertainment. But again, the existing uses in the center kind of preclude us from going in a lot of different directions.
You could explore a lot.
Right, and we're still not closed to retail. I was in Las Vegas at the big shopping center meeting in May and met with some retailers who might potentially have an interest, and we're not closing the door to that. But because the process of developing apartments would take so much time, we felt we needed to get this process started. So it's not a closed door to retail, but because Exton is so heavily developed, and the big development at 202 and 1 is also, is really very mature. Over the past 5 years, retail surrounding West Goshen has really evolved. And in the meantime, many of those big uses are shrinking their footprint because they see so much of their business being online fulfillment. And so, it's not a closed door to another use at this point, but this is something that we feel, if retail continues to change the way it is, we really feel like this has to be an option that we've gotten that train started. So it's a multi-phase approach. It's certainly not one. It's certainly one with a long-term perspective because the Robbins family is a long-term holder, and we have another generation of Robbins that are going to be taken over, and so we're going to be hanging on to it and positioning it for the future.
Thank you.
Kind of like a large medical center, like they've done up at the Exton Mall.
Well, that's not something that we're closed to. But again, that's something that, there's a lot of that going on around the area. And so it's really kind of those satellite offices are very popular, but there's a lot of that going on right now. And so we don't see anything in the Westchester area where that need exists at the present time. Certainly not something we're close to if that need evolves.
Okay.
Question for me?
Yes, could you come to the podium now? Just so that you're on the camera?
Just would like to read.
Oh, yeah, could you just, so we see you on the camera, we can hopefully hear you what you're saying.
Just want to reemphasize what Mr. Pioli pointed out. This comprehensive plan was just adopted by the board today. I know this is being thrown at you, but we spent a lot of time talking about Paoli Pike corridor there. A year and a half talking about ticket ransom. Please reference this. It's on the website. There's a couple of sections, I think priority number 7 about land development. And also priority is another issue was that of affordable housing. So all these are part of the vision that residents see for our community, and we respectfully ask that you incorporate that in any plans you move forward with.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have you been to Exton?
Yeah,
There's 400 apartments across the whole thing.
How about a bowling alley? How about bringing Grandma back?
There you go.
Anyway, is the athlete still viable?
Yes.
Okay. One idea was to have the athlete visit that space and have it expand, become like a huge Wegmans.
Acme's not really expanding their footprints. What they're planning on doing is there's discussion that our Acme will probably have one of their tavern concepts inside, and they're going to do some modifications and some renovations. But the Acme footprint is not expanding again because a lot of people are buying getting online to find their groceries from the list.
Okay.
So we're not seeing that.
And another idea is to have apartments above and first floor retail. So that would be an idea.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, the last item on the agenda is public comment.
Mr. Brockett should be first. He followed the rules and provided his comments before.
Yes, he did. Thank you very much. Come on up.
Madam Chair, when you came to my house to solicit my vote, I explained to you the harassment I had been undergoing the past decade because of the snow throwback on my walkway. You were very enthusiastic about the problem. When I messaged you in March of 2018, it was obvious that you had done a 180 and were defending the drivers when you said the drivers cannot control the snow coming off the plow. This is a ridiculous statement and flatly not true. 2 years ago, I was on my way to downtown during a snowstorm. I came to the intersection of Phoenixville Pike and the 322 bypass. The light was red, and I was directly behind a snowplow truck. When the light turned green, the truck proceeded down the bypass. The truck was pushing snow off the side. When the truck accelerated to 40 miles per hour, snow was being thrown back at least 12 to 15 feet. My tree line is 17 feet from the curb, and I have pictures of snow throw back 15 feet. The speed limit in my development is 25 miles per hour. So how fast did the driver have to be going to throw snow back that far? Over the past year, I have repeatedly complained about this harassment with virtually no response from this board. Mr. Paoli made a short, vague statement, and I quote, "My people are telling me something different," unquote. Later, I reminded Mr. Paoli that his constituents are his people, not township officials that have been violating township policy and allowing a situation that endangered the public welfare for over a decade. Now, having a well-educated board, I'm sure you're all aware of what a conscience is. It gives one the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. Considering the wrongdoing by township officials over the past 12 years and the fact that this board has ignored my complaints over the past year, does anyone on this board have a conscience? Having put up with this harassment for over a decade, I feel that I'm entitled to a reasonable response from this board because this board has failed to respond to my complaints and the fact that this board has been complicit with township officials that have allowed a practice that endangers the public welfare. The only conclusion that I see is that this board is corrupt. Is this board corrupt, Madam Chair? When I was diagnosed with PTSD years ago, I had a lot of stress and anxiety. The harassment that has been going on for the past 12 years has certainly contributed more to my stress and anxiety. The passage of Resolution 11, 2019 was simply an effort to silence 3 people at these meetings. In the 1930s, a man in Nazi Germany had a plan to silence a particular group of people. Is that what this board has become?
Mr. Broderick, you and I have had multiple conversations about this issue. You've had multiple presentations of your issue. I just went back and looked at how many times you've already spoken about this specific issue just in this year. And you find fault in everyone, and yet you don't accept any of the information we share with you. The information that I shared with you about Mr. Bartolome wanting to come to meet you and talk to you about why it happens.
We discussed that.
Giving you an opportunity to go in a truck to see when and how these things happen. You also accused us of singling you out, which is not true. We have no reason to do that. Mr. Halverson is no longer a supervisor here, and what he stated to you cannot be corroborated by anyone else on this board. We have no action to take because we have the ability to tell you what the action that needs to happen when they go up your street. But you refuse to have us speak to you about it, and when you have talked to me about it, in your last 2 meetings, you said things that I did not say, and you accused me of not.
What did I say that you didn't say?
It was about when you told me, no, you did not want us to come to your house. Now, my point in sharing this with you right now is that 5 times this year already, you've brought the same issue. There is no movement here because we have offered to do things for you to help you understand this process of how the snow is removed, but you have rejected that each time. So because you come monthly, say the same thing over and over again, I have the right to say, this is the last time we will hear about this issue. It is a redundant issue. It takes up time for the community to hear you repeat it. When, to this point, have yet to take us up on any of our options to help solve this problem. I asked if the public, if this board apologized to you, you said that wasn't what you wanted. What you wanted was those people to be held accountable. We don't know who those people were who were in your truck every time there was a snowstorm and what they were doing. So we don't own that responsibility except for the fact to apologize for how you believe the township has treated you in the past. So this will be the last time I will permit you to come up under public comment to repeat what you've been saying 5 times already this month and multiple times in 2018. Thank you for your comment.
Now, when we had the conversation a few months ago about the phone call.
I'm not entertaining discussion now.
So
Okay?
you're going to deny me my First Amendment right again like you did 2 months ago?
No, I didn't.
That's what you're doing.
I didn't deny you.
Yes, you did. I raised my hand to be recognized. I raised my hand to be recognized, and you admitted it during the meeting.
Here's the thing. I went and listened to that tape just last night, and last night, when I heard the tape, you actually had 4 minutes of conversation with us. Then you sat down, and I said the next person was the last person of the night. You raised your hand after we had already decided to adjourn, okay? It wasn't a violation of your rights. I gave you extra time to speak that night where you read your statement. All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I make it.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Meeting adjourned.